Police brutality is the use of excessive and/or unnecessary force by police when dealing with civilians. The excessive force imposed by police officers has grown dramatically over the past decade, causing social misinterpretations of the role that police officers play in the community. The most obvious form of police brutality is physical form. Police officers can use nerve gas, batons, pepper spray, and guns in order to physically intimidate or even intentionally hurt civilians. Police brutality can also take the form of false arrest, verbal abuse, psychological intimidation, sexual abuse, police corruption, racial profiling, political repression, and the improper use of tasers. According to Burghardt, in 2015, African Americans made up 23% of the police violence victims in the United States, even though they are only 13% of the population. With this data, it proves that Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely than white Americans to be shot and killed by police officers. Stereotypes and racial profiling of African Americans is one of the most evident contributions to police brutality. A prime example of police brutality was reported by the New York Times in the case of Eric Gardner, who died on July 17, 2014, when a New York police officer, Daniel Pantaleo, wrapped his arm around Mr. Gardner's neck and, alongside with his other officers, wrestled him to the ground during an arrest after he was seen selling untaxed cigarettes on Staten Island Street. Officer Pantaleo's actions were captured on video and seen around the world, and a call for his indictment immediately followed. Many assumed that he would be fired quickly, but neither of those things happened. Victims of police brutality may suffer from psychological effects and disorders. PTSD is an affliction that can lead to panic attacks, depression, substance abuse, or suicidal tendencies. One factor that makes PTSD more likely is whether another person, such as a police officer or prison guard, inflicted a trauma. Other factors include the length and severity of the trauma and how long it takes to get into safer circumstances after the trauma is over. According to AOTA, occupational therapy practitioners are qualified mental health professionals who assist people experiencing barriers to engage in meaningful roles and occupations to increase their participation, health, and wellness. They work with individuals of all age ranges in all phases of recovery by helping them and their caregivers identify and address recovery-based needs and strategies within the context of real-life demands. The term occupation refers broadly to everyday activities and roles that are meaningful and/or necessary to the individual. According to AOTA, occupational therapists can use the recovery model to help those suffering from PTSD due to police brutality. The recovery model requires a shared decision-making process that is person-centered and client-driven. The client-provider partnership provides shared decision-making from the time the individual first engages in the services, through the developing intervention plans, and in all other aspects of the therapeutic process. A primary goal of the recovery model is to facilitate resiliency, health, and wellness in the community of the individual's choice rather than to manage symptoms. According to AOTA, the following are examples of how the knowledge and skill base of occupational therapy is used in the process of assisting individuals in all phases of mental health recovery. To teach and support the active use of coping mechanisms to help manage the effects of symptoms of illness in one's life, including being more organized and able to engage in activities of choice. To help identify and implement healthy habits, rituals, and routines to support a wellness lifestyle by addressing barriers and building on existing abilities. To support the identification of personal values, needs, and goals to enable informed, realistic decision-making. Support the creation and use of a wellness recovery action plan in group or individual sessions. To provide information to increase awareness of community-based resources. To provide information on how to monitor physical health concerns, developing strategies to control chronic symptoms, and recognize and respond to acute changes in mental health status. And finally, to support the ability to engage in long-term planning that leads to meeting personal recovery goals.